Letters are written, never meaning to send, and I love you. Oh. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode 7 of season 2 of DNVR Nuggets' Serbian Corner. I'm your host, Miroslav, and I will be joined in a couple of minutes by my good buddies, Rayvone Hackshaw of the Everybody Loves Rayvone podcast. No, that's not true. It's the Four Corners podcast. Ray hosts with Peter, aka Buckets, since '88, and also Voja Medić of the Nuggets Serbia podcast. But before I let them out of the shadow, I wanted to do a quick recap of what happened to the Nuggets since we last saw each other. First of all, they've split the New York back-to-back, narrowly losing to the Knicks, but then equally narrowly winning against the Nets. After that, they took care of the sorry Washington Wizards while packing their bags to come back to Denver and play two of the best Eastern teams, both with serious MVP contenders. It went really well. First, they crushed the Bucks in the second half for a 23-point win, so they could concentrate on the Philadelphia 76ers. Shams Charania dropped the Joel Embiid interview on the morning of the game. Jojo used it to try and discredit Nikola Jokic as an MVP frontrunner, and then doubled down by being an early scratch from the game in Denver. And that was the fifth time he ducked the Denver game in the 7 seasons he's been playing in the NBA, or if you include his first 2 redshirt seasons, he hasn't played there in 7 out of 9 seasons he's been paid like an NBA player. Harden also missed that game, but he was really rehabbing from an injury, and of course, they both played in their next game. I am glad the Nuggets won that game easily, even though they did let the Sixers get way too close to them by the end of that game. Finally, we got this last back-to-back from the last 2 nights. The Nuggets played against the Pelicans without Nikola Jokic, but with all the other guys available, so they were able to generate a whopping 95 offensive rating. Yes, they were missing some open shots, but it's really rare to see a team that is that cold from the outside for all 4 quarters, which was enough for 14% three-point shooting. I was the loudest advocate of Jokic's stagger, but seeing how good, god-awful the other 4 starters were without him at this game, I'm officially off the Jokic stagger minutes. At least for as long as Michael Malone is the Denver Nuggets coach. And yes, I'm going to be a bit hot takey today, so just wait. After the embarrassing loss at home, the Nuggets traveled to Phoenix without 4 starters. AG and the bench mob couldn't keep up with the full-strength Suns in the first half, but they were, down 20 at the big break. But then they slowly clawed back in the game and were 2 possessions away from pulling a great upset. So that loss felt way less horrible. Okay, that's enough ranting from me. Please let me say hello to Voja and Rayvone. Hello, Voja and Rayvone. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
Voja, what's Miroslav? What's going on?
I muted my mic so I don't say anything, so I forgot to unmute it. So, hi.
Good catch. Good catch. So, guys, I am literally hoping to God that this regular season finally ends and we can go to the really basketball with real meaning. So, how do you cope with these last couple of weeks? We still have to wait for all of it to end and unravel. Ray.
I'm just an addict. I'm not going to lie. I still enjoy every game that I watch. I love every detail. I could go for year-round basketball, even if it wasn't the most meaningful to most fans. I think, I find it pretty enjoyable, and I'll miss it a lot.
That's fair. I watched. I'm not gonna lie. I managed to go through the last game with might have like 3 or 4 minutes. I didn't watch the. I didn't know who we played. Who was the game? Pelicans. That was painful. And yesterday, I'm not gonna lie. I turned off at halftime and watched the replay today because I wasn't gonna spend another like 2 hours on the second half. Even though it was a fun game, I'm glad I watched the replay. But instead of that, I watched the South Carolina Iowa women's college game. That was a banger. That was like a good get you out of your kind of like a playoff playoff atmosphere. And then after that, I was like, I'm not going back to Nuggets without everyone playing the Suns that are clearly don't even care to show up, or at least our trash team, which I'm up for either of those.
We got the update from the NBA and NBPA that they finally made an agreement on the new CBA, and I was looking at some of the new stuff, and nothing really revolutionary. I was really hoping they would shorten a season for just a bit, so they would make some of these regular season games more meaningful. I've been dialing into the EuroLeague lately a lot, and man, when I see that 34 games schedule, it's just every game is on the knife's edge. It's just every goddamn game means so much to every team in order to go to the top 8. And yeah, I would really like for no teams to be completely out or completely locked in the number 1 seed like the Nuggets were for the last couple of weeks. It felt like a drag.
Yeah. That's the 72 seems like he's just basically the last couple of weeks you would like next 10 days and the previous week you would just eliminate. That kind of makes sense. Like we're kind of in a, okay, like we're done. Like no one's kind of going through the motions. So I agree there. But can the CBA interest you in 83 games per season?
That's right.
I bet they can. For me, it's kind of like I would like to see teams just approach it a little bit differently. Like the last couple of games, or at the very least the Suns game, I really enjoyed watching Peyton Watson, for the first time this season. And if he had gotten some opportunities a little bit earlier, I'm not saying he has to, but I think we love the NBA playoffs, and we feel that the championship is the most important thing. I do feel like that takes away from some of the meaning when we're down to like an 8-9 man rotation of like, okay, these are the playoff guys, and that's what matters when it's still December, January, February. So maybe if we saw a little bit more of the other guys, I might care a little bit more, at least just being interested in the future.
One of the most interesting updates to the CBA is the rule that the player needs to play in at least 65 games in the regular season to be, able to get any of the individual accolades from the All NBA, All Defense, MVP, and so on. So, do you guys think that some of the guys that like to take, breaks from playing will be willing to reduce their per game, averages and just play for a 1 quarter in every fifth game just to formally have the number of games required?
You go, Ray, because I have a rant.
Okay. I think it has to come from somewhere, right? Whether you're limiting your minutes, or I think some players, I think about LeBron, I think about Jokic in this way, kind of limit their effort in certain contexts where you're like, okay, I'm going to play 38 minutes, but I know when the game's important. I know when the game's not important.
It's garbage. Well, in a way, so I agree with there should be some limit, as in okay, games played, but I believe what they're going to do is, especially because the media is voting, it's on a computer being like, okay, 65, this is your averages, statistically this is the best player, blah blah. It's basically going to be like an informal agreement where even though someone comes in and plays for a minute, the guys that are voting, they're going to look at 65 games, and let's say someone had 63 and are hurt, they might come in on the court foul, and like like the Drew Holiday, I don't know if you remember last year, where he had a bonus of like I think 225K to play a game, but they were already like settled in their spot. So he just comes in, fouls, and gets out of the game, but technically logs like 30 seconds of play or 15 seconds of play. So someone might come in and like just get 2 of those situations, like 1 possession games. And then people that are going to vote, they're going to smart and just go like per 75 possessions per these minutes, and basically eliminate these outliers where they just showed up for like a few possessions to get to 65. So it just was like a weird, because that's, I don't know if you guys saw the list people have been pulling out, like who's would be ineligible this year, and it's like you're like 7 of your 15 best players in the league are ineligible for any awards, and you're like, okay, I guess it's you're honoring like Fox and Randall, but then MVP award would now be Jokic, Tatum, Fox, Shai, and Sabonis and Randall. Like that, those would be your like top 5-6 guys that have over 65 games at this point.
Yes, but
And
that's because there is no limit required, and this is why they've played so few games. The idea behind this is to force players to start playing games again, because if you look at the 90s and the 2000s, all of the best players played 75 plus games. I mean, in most of the seasons. So that's I guess the idea behind it, and I really am for it. I mean, I just want to see, for instance, if Joel Embiid will be able to average 34 points per game if he's forced to play in 70 games. I mean, that's going to be a
65
nice
is already,
wrinkle.
he's pretty much there. Like he's 63.
Well,
like
this year, this year.
Well,
Just
my
to be
thing is
clear,
mostly like the problem there is with injuries. If you miss and you're 63 and you're hurt, actually like hurt, and that all NBA selection, because MVP usually they take that into account anyway. Like all these years, except maybe this year, they might give it to Embiid, even though he has like the least amount of games, blah blah, whatever. But the all NBA and stuff that affects that affects their salary. So that's like a little bit of a weird thing. Like if they are hurt for 17 games, or actually 18 games and go under the 65, then that like the kicker comes in and they don't have like a 30 million bonus. Like that's the weird part. Again, they have a little bit more like chances, but someone gets like Jokic gets drafted, doesn't play for a couple of years that much, so he doesn't have a shot to go on all NBA. He has the 1 year where he's good the last year and he gets hurt, but he's really like would have been put into the all NBA. He doesn't, his contract gets affected. And that's the problem, is like they should have separated those awards. And the problem is also historical stuff is now with legacy and like assessing the Hall of Fame and stuff. Then you're like, oh, now we gotta like go back and retrack. Like, okay, we can't count like all NBA if there's like 3 or 4 instances where they were really had one of the best seasons, but they played 64 games. That's like the part that's gonna get tricky. And I really honestly, we talk like I think it's weird. I think it's gonna come to these situations like a Giannis like rebound for a triple double, where they're going to come into the game even like on one leg just to log in those minutes, or log in those official games so they can be chosen into this. And the voters are going to ignore based on those circumstances, but like screw it, like that's 65. So it's kind of like the blocking. You remember like they assign like 0.0 blocks to guys like to qualify, and like Miles Turner was supposed to get like the blocking the blocking title, but he didn't have enough games to qualify, so they just wrote in zeros and he still was the number one for the average. So that's kind of like a weird, I mean, but overall it's honestly I don't care, like as much as I'm saying now, like who CBA, everyone's like pissed about it. I'm like
it's millionaires fighting the billionaires. So yeah, that's basically it.
It's funny, they're like, oh, we players lost again. It's like, what did you expect? You came in to a business deal with a bunch of billionaires. They're not billionaires by accident. Like they know how to cutthroat this thing. And as much as you guys think you're like a big deal because you're players, like you're still like probably inexperienced in all these dealings with these ruthless like capitalists. They know how to screw you in every turn. So I'm not surprised. Like again, the players lost.
Yes.
You'd be more okay with it if we added, say, like a minutes threshold. Say you have to play in a certain number of games, but you also have to play 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes in those games.
Yeah.
It's never easy when you're trying to thread the needle to try to set an example of how the superstar should actually behave. But we'll see what the future holds. Really is what Voja said. There are more serious injuries than it used to be in the past. It's because the game is so much more physical right now, because everybody needs to cover the full half court, like on almost every possession. That's something that never happened in the past. So it makes sense that guys are getting more injured and they need probably more rest than before.
The thing is I would call back on Vlatko's interview when he said he doesn't like to miss workouts because the body gets used to it. That is also a thing that might be like a weird side effect with like, oh, I want to qualify for the number of games to get this award so I can get the contract money. That might cause like the situation like, oh, I'm playing more, my body's getting used to this wear and tear, and it's hardened by these contacts. And it was just because Spurs are the one that started low management, kind of, right, like with the Parker Duncan. But they were they were old and had so many
Yep.
miles on that like body that was like old man strength at that point. So their load management didn't affect, like when you talk about guys that are 21 and load manage, they still haven't hardened. And so you load manage and you come back into this like highly like intense physical environment. There might be like a situation. I don't know if people have done research about, like scientists done research on it, but it might be like a situation where they are not hard enough. Oh, so they come in and they get hurt based on, we all know when you don't play for a while, you get thrust in, and you get hurt, but you shouldn't be. You in your mind, you're like, I shouldn't be hurt by missing like a month off, but then you realize like you load manage for a month, but then your body is not used to that stress. And so maybe that kind of balances it out. But it's just, I think we're going to see a lot of those. Like, there's a jump ball foul, we're going to go out of the game and get to games.
Yeah, you're right about the young guys. We all know about the rookie wall, like guys playing for 50 games, and then after that they cannot play anymore because their bodies are not used to the marathon the NBA really is. Okay, let's now jump into our first team for today. When I was preparing for this episode, and I started that after that Pelicans debacle, the main thing that was populating the basketball part of my old and tired brain was the fact that we all know this is the best Nuggets team in the Jokic era and one of the most talented ones in franchise history. But the non-Jokic minutes, and even more concerning, the non-Jokic games, look like they're played by a very young, inexperienced team that is still getting used to the speed and physicality of NBA games. And we know that's not true. This is a team with a lot of veterans. Most of the players are in their primes, but still 3-7 without Jokic. That's like a 24-25 win pace. That's a bit worse than the Charlotte Hornets, who, in all fairness, did win 2 games in a row against the mighty Dallas Mavericks. But I digress. This is Michael Malone's 10th season as a head coach, 8 of them with the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. And before that, 2 seasons with Boogie Cousins in Sacramento. And Boogie Cousins was arguably the best passing big man just before Jokic. So if you look at the last 10 years, Michael Malone couldn't have had better passing big men than those 2 guys. So my question to you guys is, does Michael Malone even know how to play without a great passing big? Is it just a really great coincidence that he's so good at that, so he maximized Nikola, but on the other hand, he's struggling for so many years with every non-Nikola minute?
Go for it, Ray.
Okay, yeah, sure. I've gotten the general impression over the years that Michael Malone's a very defensively oriented guy, and I can tell how much he focuses on those details, the rotations, where you're deciding to hedge, how far you hedge, things like that. What I don't always see is that same level of detail being paid attention on the offensive end, particularly when we're talking about things like screening, how to set screens, how to set guys up for those screens, how to cut off ball, how to move and run consistently with a high level of focus and intensity. But I don't want to put it all on him in the sense that right now, I also feel like outside of Nikola, there is a lack of a certain kind of responsible steward of the game from a ball handling perspective that I think makes it a little bit more difficult, where all these players are kind of dependent on Jokic to set them up and sort of control the game. And I love Jamal Murray, and I don't want to take anything away from him either, but I also feel like his best role in the NBA is as a scorer, is his levels of focus and sorts of dead-eye Kobe-ness. And, we don't really have a Monte or Alonzo Ball or someone like that who's going to sort of make it their main priority to set everyone else up around them for success on the offensive end.
Yeah, The interesting part was I commented that on Twitter that I'm not. You're right. Like it's not a bad team. That's what's annoying is like, oh Jokic is like no help. It's like it's not that it doesn't have help. It's sometimes how they're presented, and you're right. And it was weird because the Clippers game, like Jamal had a triple double at that game. They were, I think they just seemed a little more healthier. And also, I think they're in also the mode of like, oh man, we gotta play like 7 of these. Like we're done. Like let's just get this going. One thing is that I think that just the level of focus is different from those games that they won in the beginning of the year when they played without Jokic. Second thing is a little double-edged sword from the fact that you have a Jokic is that you're not. You said that your job is to be a responsible ball handler, not to turn it over and mess up basically the stuff that he creates for you. And that's kind of a different, right? If we had 20 games without Jokic, like would we see a Philly situation where a lot of these guys know how to play already without Embiid, and then so they know how to just shift a different style when Embiid's not there. So that's what's kind of interesting. The other thing is with Malone is not my I mean, this things we don't know what's kind of going on, and like we don't know at what level of preparedness Jamal is, how much they want to actually get all these guys to like play. The thing is, just they had like 9 misses in a row before they called a timeout and actually set up some plays that made sense from the start to set up, because Gordon is like basically your passing big man when you're playing that kind of small ball, especially with Thomas Bryant. So it was weird that they haven't already had a plan implemented. Hey, when Jokic's not playing, we're going to run basically same sets to begin and get the ball to Jamal. It's something that's already like a muscle memory. And Gordon's like big enough that he can do the post up moves and bully ball, but also create from there. And so that's the part that I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, how did they not get this organized beforehand? How did they not have that switch? Like, okay, he's not playing. Let's do this, because those are the details that are going to decide for the playoff game. If when Jokic rests and they decide to shorten the rotation and have Gordon in there, or he's in foul trouble, or something happens, like basically just mostly like, let's say assuming he's healthy, just foul trouble or like those substitution minutes. And especially because they should have and could have implemented some of the moves that you play differently and kind of go back to 2018-19 when they actually were running up the scores even then when Jokic was on the bench, because they would have, they would get Plumlee, but Plumlee is not exactly the type of Jokic guy. They would still have, fast breaks, shooting. Honestly, I thought they were getting to that point with the second unit when all switch unit with Vlatko, Brown, and Zeke, when you had like KCP and Murray, they were just buzzing all over the court. And I thought that was the plan. And then they went back into regressed after the trade deadline with Reggie, with Bryant, and trying to implement, and basically just like went back to the beginning of the season once they already figured some stuff out that was actually interesting. And kind of yesterday, or even in the Pelicans game yesterday, you saw that bench, quote unquote, bench unit that came in was like good against the Pelicans because they already know how to play without Jokic, or at least like how to behave when Jokic is not on the court, because they've done it already. Starters look lost without Jokic, which was weird.
Yeah. One thing I would add also is that, for a long time, I'd been someone who really advocates for Vlatko Cancar, not just because he's young, but because among the non-starters, there are very few players in my mind who are that sort of person who can think the game in such a way that they can take the ball out of Jamal's hands and let him just kind of focus on being himself. That, and that's kind of where he's thrived from when he's come in the league all the way up to now. I think when he can just focus on being a bucket, I think that's when he shines.
Yeah, Vlatko actually is, that there was this graph about all the Nuggets players and their true shooting with and without Nikola in the 5, and Vlatko is the only guy that actually shoots even better without Nikola on the court, which is an interesting wrinkle, because some of the guys like Bruce Brown shoots like 15% better with Jokic than without him. It's just an amazing difference. So yeah, Vlatko, I agree. Vlatko was a very logical way to go instead of Nikola, and just plug him in there and try to do a lot of similar things to what you already do. But on the other hand, I was just furious to see our two max guys not being able to do anything substantial in that Pelicans game, because I mean I do realize those guys are not the top tier max guys. Like there's like only like 10 top tier 10 max guys in the league. It's very logical. I mean, if you go to Milwaukee, you have Chris Middleton and you have Drew Holiday. Those guys are not also the top tier max guys, but they are max guys. But I don't know, man. It's just when I see the score from Philly and from Philadelphia or from Phoenix or any other great team without their best players, it's just they just play much better than what the Nuggets are showing. So it's a concern of mine, and God, please just don't let Nikola get hurt for a couple of games in the playoffs, because I don't think at this point they could beat anybody in the playoffs
without him.
Yeah, like for a couple of games. If they just would have to lose a couple of games because
the thing is I don't know who could. That's kind of the maybe the Nuggets would look the worst optically without Jokic and would lose the games. I don't know, like if you're not, like it was Dallas that beat Utah, and Utah was like basically just were like checked out, and Brunson turned out to be Brunson from the Knicks, from the Knicks team now, which is like a good number one point guard. And Memphis was the other one because they're young and so like were later last year that they could win games without Ja Morant. But otherwise, I don't, when Booker who got hurt, like Pelicans kind of took advantage as a young team last year. Chris Paul as well. When Davis got hurt, that the Lakers year when Phoenix went to the finals, they lost the series. Like it's one of those but I think like you're right with the also like how they look and if they can even hang. You're right. I don't think Nuggets could hang. Thing is like that was the weird thing is like they look so good against the Clippers that like January 13th game. I don't know where that team went. And I think they were finding out that stuff. That was when Vlatko was playing, when Brown was playing. That's why I go back to you guys were saying about Vlatko, and I see the comments they were talking about Jeff Green and stuff. The thing is, like, I always go back to my point was Brown over Devon Reed was always similar now with Vlatko over Jeff. Is Vlatko, I think, does these little things better and is more of like a playmaker in the little things that actually prop up the rest of the team than just a couple of buckets and a huge dunk. That's what like Jeff Green for me is like, because I saw it was like loose balls recovered. He's like 341st in the league, Jeff Green, and that's an issue when you have a second unit. That's one of the weird things, because last year he was decent in the starting unit, but he's surrounded with all this talent. He just needed to like kind of finish plays and not like mess up too much. With the second unit, you kind of need people to go up and do little things like Christian Brown does, and Jamal, when he plays with them, he's like also when everyone is around him like doing well. When they start running is the point for me with that unit, and I think like Vlatko is the guy. And so I think if they had that, then it would be a different story. It's just kind of all these like veterans that are optically okay but not actually contributing to like get us over the hump. That's my issue.
Yeah,
and with good, and your point about with good defense, Vlatko, exactly that too.
Yeah.
To your point about running, I also feel like the pace of the game, I think, is a really important factor as far as like how well they're going to do without Jokic. Where they look the absolute worst is where the pace slows down to a crawl, both in the forecourt but also in the half court too, when they're running single action possessions or maybe a possession with like two actions. I think they really struggle, but when they can kind of connect multiple 3, 4, 5 actions together in a sequence and kind of create pace in the half court, I think that's a really big factor as far as them creating not just good looks, because they find open shots even, in this sort of like ugly version of basketball. But I think it's that confidence that comes from knowing you're going to consistently find them in the rhythm of the offense that also leads to better shooting, and especially from guys like Bruce Brown, from Vlatko, from a lot of these guys who aren't going to create on their own, because sometimes Jamal can just go off for 45 points, just not even in being in rhythm, just because he's that talented. But not everyone is that player.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I mean, when I look at the starting five, Jamal is always the guy that's slowing the game the most. And Nikola is actually, even though he looks slow, he's actually the one that's picking up the pace usually. And when they don't have Nikola on the court, they don't have the luxury of having that one action possession, because when the ball finds Nikola on the block or even on the elbow, or sorry, on the top of the key, he will usually find a really, really good solution in 90% of the possessions. And when you don't have that kind of luxury, I agree with you, Ray. You really need to try mixing and matching stuff and trying to find something better than just the one action possessions.
Yeah.
I agree.
And the rhythm is you talked about Bruce and Vlad, when these guys they're making shots in rhythm when the joke. MPJ is horrible. I think is it 20% when on threes when Jokic isn't playing in games and he's not playing, and that's one of those things like getting to understand that, okay, with Jokic, like you're more, I think probably more relaxed because you have him, and with MPJ he knows in those situations I have to make this. But as you said, Ray, when it slows down, when that half court of theirs gets bogged down, even those open shots are not coming in like complete rhythm. He's either like the pass is either a little too late because it's not Jokic passing, the timing's a little bit off, or he gets the ball like a little early, so he's not. Oh, what should I dribble? Like, and what should I jack it up immediately? And it's under. I mean, that's the thing, is that's how complex NBA is and how easy Jokic makes it look. So we don't sometimes understand like what kind of goes into all that stuff, and how you can get used to that rhythm, and then all of a sudden, oh shit, like we're it's a different story completely. Like, Monte goes to Washington and his numbers drop, even though he's like a good floor general, but his numbers drop because his different style, and he's also has different types of shots that he has, like a little less time on the 3-point shot. Like, he can't dribble up in it. The floaters are not completely there because there's no gravity pulling towards Jokic. I heard saw a question in the chat, like, would the second unit be struggling if Monte was still here? The thing is, like, 2 years ago, they were still not great. Like, Monte was coming in as a starter, basically as a closer in the Portland series and the Phoenix series. I think he eventually started. But the bench was still struggling. You still had like double greens. You still had that Hartenstein, JaVale McGee. Like, it was kind of all over the place as well. It's because of like just the rest. Well, at that point, it was the rest of the crew that was not great around Monte. This year, maybe they would be fine, and you could have a all 5 unit with Monte and all the switch guys. But if you still have Jeff Green and you would still force Reggie Jackson in the 3-guard lineup, you would have the same problems as last year when they were Facu, Monte, and like Bones would play together and like stuff like that. That's the issue, is like the combination. It's not just Malone. It's just a combo of like, okay, these personnel, these decisions that Malone makes, and then the fact that like Jokic is so good that sometimes you get too used to that level of easiness that gets around you when he's there. So it's kind of all over the place. That was a comment. Then he Bones' offense, and he was, again, that was the thing. He's like, he was also not good because of the infrastructure. He was good with Boogie, and because that's why we love basketball. And that's why we like to analyze it, because it's not just that simple of like, here's a good player, play.
This is a comment I see often. I just don't think Jamal is good enough to run a unit by himself. We don't know that, guys, because we have never seen him do it for like 15 games in a row to get a real sample of it, and not only sample, but allowing him to get into that role, to really try and pull the team on his shoulders. But I do agree, it doesn't look too promising.
Okay. Thomas Bryant would look a lot better if Monte was here. That's what my main thing is, like, it'd be nice to have a point guard. Bones didn't look good because he didn't really have that center. Now that we have that center, we don't really have a point guard to pair with him in that way.
Kind of switched play. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, is that the DeAndre would have been great with Bones if it was DeAndre from like 7 years ago. stuff that would have been like the good combo because you have a high flyer. Now he's like really, I mean, you see him now, like he's huge. Like it was always
He walks
buff and
into his
stuff, but
screens.
yeah, he rolls, walks into rebounds and then dunks maybe, but which is again, that's why it's interesting to have a roster spot. And I didn't like it when they signed him because it looked like he was the only one before we knew that they might have a switchable small ball unit that might work defensively. But when you see him like in some of those games where you can plug and play him, if there's a lumbering center and a backup center on the other side, you can put DeAndre for like 7 minutes just to kind of control, like, get in that paint and just kind of do the bull in a china shop, just kind of get everyone out of patrol the paint for just a little bit, not like obviously, last night the whole game, like not whole game, he's a starter, like that's kind of even though it was okay, but it's not you don't want that all the time.
Okay, after these last 20 really depressing minutes about the number one seed in the West, let's take a short break and then we'll move to something else. And we're back. So, the MVP race is coming to its close, thanks God. Only 5-ish games left for all the teams, and we'll finally get some rest from all the narratives and bullshit arguments used to discredit the guys that are not in the agenda of people making those arguments. At one point, it became so disgusting, I completely stopped caring about it, even though I normally care about it a lot since I chose to become an amateur Jokic biographer. I was finally free of it all, and then Joel Embiid had to drop that lousy interview and pulled me back in. So I used to like Embiid for his off-the-court stuff. For years, he was very positive about Jokic, and I guess it lasted until he recognized they're going to be rivals for the individual accolades. But after all that happened around their matchup that never happened, I'm now super low on him, and it's going to take years of him being nice again. And by the way, that's totally not going to happen before I like him again. So what's your 2 cents on this subject? Is it 2 cents or 5 cents? 2 seems a bit low, right?
Well, when they said it was probably a lot of money.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. You could buy something with 2 cents at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't blame Embiid for caring about the MVP the way he does. I'm okay with it. I just felt like I've always cared. I want him to win MVP. I feel like it's going to be cool. Not him. When I say him, I mean Jokic, just to be clear. And the weirdest time for me was the 2 to 3 week window where we as a Nuggets collective were pretending, we don't even care. MVP doesn't even matter. Never even wanted it. Didn't even, I think for me, the MVP and playoff success, for the most part, they're independent things. Jokic could win the MVP and we can get knocked out in the first round. Jokic could win MVP and finals MVP. Or, neither of those things can happen. So I'm not upset that Embiid has taken on a bit of a Mallard identity, a little quacking going on. That's what I'll say.
I had it. I'm gonna be honest. Like I really didn't care. So first one was a surprise. I was like, wow, he won number 1 MVP. I'm good. Like didn't expect this ever to happen because I always go back to the 2018-19 season when they were the number 2 seed. He was averaging like 2010 or 2011 and 7 assists, and he was like behind Paul George. They had Westbrook averaging a triple double next to him, and they were 6th seed in the West. And so I was like, if that happened, like if they put George ahead of him, I was like, there's no way they're ever going to give him an MVP. And I still maintain that he wouldn't have gotten it if everyone's maintained healthy. Because especially after the bubble, you saw what Jamal did, and they would have always said, like, we has Jamal. Like, he's not the MVP. So this kind of weird thing that, the ACL kind of caused, like, this like, a surgence of Jokic and, like, appreciation but when he gets these teams to so you basically, like, he's like the Tim Duncan style of, like, he's on your team probably around 50 wins a season. Last year, couldn't believe I went to sort the minutes from last year I was like, okay, he was 16th. Like, why do people, I understand people getting mad. And then you look, oh, wow, this is the team that had 48 wins. Like, what? Of course he was the MVP. Are you crazy? Like, you had Devon Reed, like 800 minutes. Jeff Green was starting for 62 games. Like, Monte Barton, where you're starting backcourt. You have Campazzo and, like, Marcus Howard and like, getting a lot of minutes. And so I was like, man, they gave him a 2. I'm like, this is I couldn't even dream of this. So I muted MVP and Embiid like weeks ago. I said in January, like, I think Embiid's going to win because it was kind of like trending that way, even though Jokic was doing his thing. It was just how I was building up, like that straw poll. My friend and I were joking, like Jokic was getting praised by the ESPN, a lot of media, up until that straw poll when he became first again. And then that thing dropped in a dime shift. Like, he's horrible on defense again. Like, there's no more like, oh, he's actually not that bad on defense. To now he's like a traffic cone. He's the worst. Like Kirk Colesbury's like, oh, he's the worst allowing layups since they started tracking in 2013. You're like, okay, 10 years of sample sizes, whatever. So I was like, I'm muting this. I don't care anymore. And then somehow like someone did like a weird like, not Embiid, but like some shift of words that end up like going through my Twitter filter. And I was like, okay, what the hell is happening? And I unmuted Embiid, and then I saw the comments. I'm like, why did I do this? That pissed me off so much. Now I want him to win 3 MVPs, 4 maybe next year, with like averaging 35 a game if they give him free throws now, and then the title, because it was so lame. Like, again, he's doing it just tells me how he commented in that article, that he freaking reads Twitter all the time. He just regurgitated every bad take everyone has, and was like, but then it was prefacing it, well, I don't care. Like, you can say you care, and then you also like just be a man and like say he sucks, I'm better than him, I should be the MVP, and be like, okay, tip of the cap, fine. You're not even mentioning the name, then you're doing the pouty mouth like, I'm not, I don't care, but I actually like care secretly, and I want you to like me, and no one likes me, when it's just pathetic. And so I think he should have just either like came out, be a full villain, and then does the thing of like, oh, I don't care, I'll be an asshole, like, oh, I like being the underdog. Like, dude, you were the 3rd pick and the title of the process of the rebuild of Philly. There's no underdog in you. Like, you can think that, and that's like the weird, always like the biggest, when Duke goes this year, University of Duke, and he's like, we're the underdogs in this NCAA tournament. Like, are you like, what's going on here? Or the Lakers, when they say like everyone's against us and the refs hate us. You're like, okay, something's weird here. So that would just piss me off. And then you do that stuff, and then you just don't show up and not even sit on the bench. And then what? And then you play the next game. Like, it was so lame. It was just, and then he does and comes out again and says, well, I wasn't ducking anyone. I played him once. Like, my stats speak for themselves. What? Like, is that? So what's so now like Steph and all these guys should have just retired after last year and said we're the greatest ever because like we won and no one beat us after we won. Like, that's basically what it is. Oh, I have 47 against him, so unless we meet in the finals, like I have that for the next year and a half until we play again, if I don't skip again.
He has hundreds of millions of dollars. He has his burners. He has his Drew Hanlon. Why do you have a maturity of a 12-year-old? Like, come on, man, be better. There's no reason for you to behave this way. You already have the machinery on your side. Why do you need to drop so low? Is it possible that this urge is so strong that there's nothing that you feel shameful about? Come on, man, be better than that. I'm really disappointed in him. I'm always disappointed when great basketball players talk slight about their peers, because it's like, come on, guys, you are the best out there in the world. Already, the salaries in NBA are so high. You already have like 90% of all the top players in the NBA. Like, out of 450 NBA players, probably like 350 are, among the top 400 or whatever it is. So everybody is awesome. Just don't do that, man. Sure, you build a rivalry. It's not a problem. Of course, you should build a rivalry. That's good, but come on, be better than that.
Well, it's just I'm gonna go back on just disagree a little. I don't care if they try. They should. I mean, they can trash talk as much as they want. I respect what Dylan Brooks does more than what Embiid did. At least like Dylan Brooks is is a jackass, but at least he comes out and is like, Draymond sucks. He's awful. I'm better. Cool. Like it's you show it, you don't show it, you lose, you win. It's fun for us. Like I really don't engage. I really don't care. But like, okay, I'm gonna pull up Memphis and Golden State in general as a fan, and so there's a little extra spice on the court. Oh, why is that? Oh, because he said he sucks, and now Draymond's upset and wants to play. But then he does the whispers to Draymond's like, oh, I actually played played well, so because you said Jokic was a tougher guard, and then I lost and scored 46. Like I'm satisfied, and it's just that like weird. We mentioned a lot of times like the more we follow and the more these players have social media and like come out and like talk, the more you'll realize they're like insecure as any other person in the world, and maybe even more so because of the public image, and they're just lame sometimes and a lot of times. And I mean, I don't care. That's the thing, is like I'm not judging. Like it's just then you can't like, because it's okay, you're insecure, like you accept, you move on, but then acting as an underdog and people are against you, and there's like spinning these like narratives that people hate you, and then introduce like racism and a lot of this stuff is like what it's that part is like, that's why I muted, because it's when it went into Kendrick Perkins invoking that and then inviting a whole different demographic of America. It doesn't even follow NBA but just wants to fight the woke culture and all that crap. Like that was even more disgusting, and like I didn't, that's why I wanted to even get out of this, and then using that as well just to like prop your own desire for the MVP. You could have just said, my play speaks for itself, which is true. He was great this year. Like he didn't need to say anything. He was winning the MVP, and he might still win the MVP. But he just, for me at least, you're just kind of like, you tarnished your own good play by just like complaining about not winning the MVP.
I think there's like a life lesson in here, not just for NBA players, but I think for people in general, that is just honesty, and not just honesty with the public, with other people, but also with yourself, and that is going to take you a lot farther, get you a lot more points, regardless of who you are and how you are and who you want to be. I think if you're honest with yourself, people will respect that.
Yeah, exactly. It just, it's because that's the thing is, again, you said it right. Like people, I don't mind that people care about the awards. Like sometimes I wish Jokic care more, as in admit that you care too, and that's because I don't think he doesn't. This year, I think he doesn't, because he won 2, and he's like, okay, I've won 2. This is great company. All these players that won 2 is incredible. And then I think at one point he was fed up with the narratives, to the point where like I'd rather say I don't care and I'm just gonna separate it. But again, he said after like a couple, Taylor Rooks interview, he said I thought it didn't matter that if I win the MVP, and then I looked at the list, then I thought about it, and then it kind of hit me that wow, this is actually really cool. And then after that second one, he said like I want to talk to this is something cool for my kids and grandkids, that I might like once I was really good at this, and this is the proof that I was really good at it. And so even he like changed it up a bit. And I think this year he probably doesn't care, because of the whole like you inviting this weird like tension for no reason. And he's always asked these questions of like, what'd you think about Embiid? Like, what'd you think about this guy? What'd you think about the MVP? And imagine for 9 months, like the day one of the season, you start this conversation. Like I think everyone would be fed up with it.
Okay, let's move to the last subject for tonight. I wanted actually to speak about the Pelicans, Timberwolves, Lakers, and Thunder, but since we're already running pretty long, let's just stick to the Lakers, because many of the Nuggets fans fear the Lakers the most, because of the off-the-court stuff, the historic discrepancy in free throws. They have something like 470 free throws more than their opponents this season, which is actually larger than the point differential of 28 different NBA teams. So point differential. And these are just the free throws. It's just insanity. So the Lakers, their defense sucked for most of this season. And this time they're not as huge as they were in the 2020 when the Nuggets last met them in the playoffs. 80, sure. But other than that, Mo Bamba, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, is
Who's not
LeBron
even playing.
James. Yeah, is LeBron going to try and play against Nikola? Who are the guys that are supposed to stop Nikola inside? Let's start with that. Do you have a feeling about it?
I look at I don't want to make it out as
Scott
if
Foster?
he's explicit competition. that's part of it. The free throw
That's-
compensation, I think, as a whole aspect of this is going to be frustrating and annoying. But I think what the Lakers really need to beat the Nuggets in a series is for Mo Bamba to play and to play well. And that this is true, I think, also for the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves just don't have LeBron James. If you can frustrate Jokic with a certain amount of size, you're not going to make him have a bad series. Like that's not part of the conversation. But I think you can make him, or at the very least, the other players around him, inefficient enough. I think that's really the threat that the Lakers pose. And at the end of the day, LeBron James is who he is.
Yeah.
But who is LeBron James? When you mentioned that,
Why is LeBron James?
I mean, is
LeBron James?
I mean, he is not a top 5 player, right? I mean,
right now, over
maybe.
an 82 game plus 16 game playoff series, no. But I think in a moment, in a stretch, I think that's still there if he needs it. Is he going to be healthy? I think that's a separate question. I think they both, him and Anthony Day 2 Davis, both need to be healthy, for the entirety of that series as well. That's important.
Yeah. The funny thing is, for me, it was, so they lost the few games they lost to the Lakers. A couple of games, right? It was 2-2 with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3-1 too. The thing with that was, it was, for me at least, like, it was actually Westbrook that beat us because the second unit, because he's such a 0 to 60 guy that I don't think the second unit could hang with Westbrook led second unit of the Lakers, because there was no one to stay in front of him, and so that was his thing. And so now they don't have him. So my thing with, if the Lakers would be, let's say, assuming the free throw crap like goes out the windows, like it's actually a little more balanced, even though they're ahead of the free throws, at least they're not calling bullshit and like actually allowing Jokic to get like, clobbered inside and not calling anything. If they keep up the 1-3 foul call, like I think the Nuggets are good. Like that tempo is like basically 10 free throws a game for Jokic if it's 1-3 calls. It gets bad if it's like 1-4, 1-5 with smaller guys. It's that minutes without Jokic on the court. If Darvin Ham like gets the rotation, so there is either Davis and then you have Austin Reeves that, like, if he continues to play out of his mind, and then they overwhelm that second unit so much that they get the game out of the rhythm enough to when other people come in. And then you also have to like take into account like that Michael Porter has to have this like brain aneurysm that he doesn't make like 45% of his shots when he's open or whatever. I think the Nuggets are so much better, but if you want to talk about like devil's advocate, what needs to go right for the Lakers to beat the Nuggets, regardless of the ref games, it has to be these like minutes without Jokic on the court, and they have to consistently beat the Nuggets by like 8 in both stints for that to be like kind of balanced. And then you go into the clutch minutes, and then Ben Davis maybe can go off, and he's had like, I think weirdly enough, the most 30-15 games this year, which is one of those. Then you go back into like, okay, yeah, it makes sense because he played like half the games this year. He rests like for a week, and then he has a 30-15 game. But I don't think like I would call Nuggets 4-1 if they meet the Lakers. Like, I'm that confident, and I hate the Lakers, and I also just think the Nuggets are so much better.
It's like with Kyrie Irving last year. He was super rested on every game he was playing, so he put like amazing numbers. I have another question for you guys.
We'll play the Magic after like 5 days. And you're like, yeah, sure, yes.
Who is the best perimeter defender on the Lakers? Do they have a perimeter defender at all?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. It's probably, I mean, Vanderbilt for everything, I guess.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, but that's the
Fair.
thing is like, does Jamal need an elite? Is he going to be good enough that he needs an elite guy to guard him? If a regular defender, like if they put whatever, I don't even know, like Beasley's not a good defender, but if they put Beasley and that's enough to like make him not score 20, that's a problem, right? Like that's what we're expecting Jamal to like score 20 on anyone, and that's, you know, on a decent amount of percentage, you know, efficiency. So you're right. Like that's the thing is like they got got Pat Bev out and like, you know, a lot of, I guess I see, you know, Vando. I guess I don't know.
Maybe Davon Reed if he rediscovers what made him an NBA player.
Is he playing at all?
Fair. No, he's not.
I'm not sure, but I think the
But yeah,
key
you're
for them
right.
is more just having more size than the other team, and maybe not
Yeah.
so much relying on the perimeter defense as much as the help side and that sort of closing off the paint and dominating the paint. I feel like that's always been their calling card.
There's a Troy Brown is there. I think the Lonnie Walker, like, but none of those guys are your lockdown guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really strange team. I mean,
I hate them
but
so
player
much.
by player, I'm not scared of them at all. At all. Like, yeah, sure. If Jokic is the number one guy in that series, and I don't know, LeBron or AD is number 2 and number 3, that's not a problem. We agree on that. But then who's number 4? Is it Jamal? Is it Aaron Gordon? Is it Michael Porter? Pick one, because all 3 of them are the next 3 consecutive guys. So, and even the bench.
I'll ask you. I mean, I'll ask you this: like, if they didn't have the Lakers on the jersey in that roster, you see that roster, like, are you afraid of them?
Nobody would be talking about him at all.
Yeah. I mean, if they're the Wizards, I mean, they were maybe because of LeBron James, but like, if they were the, you know, OKC or the Wizards with that roster.
Yeah, but the talk would be like, why is this team wasting LeBron's prime years? He's only 39 and they're wasting he's age 39.
I end up muting the Lakers word on Twitter as well the other day. When I saw the Lakers are going to win the title by like a Sports Illustrated chief editor or something, I'm like, I'm done, man. I can't. Like that was like every other tweet was like about the Lakers not fearing the Nuggets. I'm like, okay, I guess if they need to tell themselves that, I don't want to read this anymore. So I just muted it. I just screw the Lakers.
So what would you
Twitter sometimes?
Your prediction of that series?
What do you say?
If the Lakers would meet the Nuggets in the first round, what would be the prediction for the length of the series?
4-1.
Let's say the Nuggets win in 6 games.
Yeah. We still need to see if they're actually able to win in 5 games against anybody.
That's also true.
Okay.
We'll settle. Compromise for 6.
Okay, good chat, guys. People, don't forget, if you understand Serbian, never miss an episode of Nuggets Serbia with Voja and Antun. If you're only speaking English, then you have to listen to Four Corners Pod with Ray and Peter. They're awesome every week. Do you know who is your next guest? Do you have a guest planned?
Yeah, we've got the Drop Step. I don't know if you've seen him on Twitter at all, but he's a great guy, also from Maryland. And he also works for the Nuggets media team doing like video editing, things like that. Yeah, you can find me online at Rayvone Hackshaw, my partner Peter, Bucket Since 88, like you mentioned, and the podcast feed at Four Corner Pod. It's FOUR Corner Pod, etc.
Okay, so in case you are still listening,
I think we cornered the corner market on podcasts.
We have cornered the corner
100%.
market. We have all the corners here.
All the corners are cornered. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. If you stayed with
That's
us
a good one.
all the way to this sentence, thank you for being super awesome, and idemo Nuggetsi.
Idemo.